Over at BangTheBook.com, lots of great stuff going on right now. Parker Michaels working hard on a first-round playoff primer. That should be up here later today. My MLB picks, I'm still going at it. I know it's been a rough start to the season, but a couple of plays I do like today that I just posted before the show, so you can check those out over at BangTheBook.com. Also, we'll have NBA series previews for the postseason, previews on every game. We'll have a lot of stuff going on with that. Andrew Howard doing his Sunday night baseball prop betting picks. That comes every Sunday, obviously. Got a lot of good stuff going on over at BangTheBook.com, on our Bang the Book YouTube page as well, and then, of course, right here on Bang the Book Radio, where on Thursday I'll do another edition of the Bettor's Box. As you know, this and every edition of Bang the Book Radio presented by our friends over at DSI Sportsbook. BTB200 is that promo code. 100% deposit match bonus for the Sportsbook. 100% deposit match bonus for the live casino. At BetDSI, it's only a game until you bet it. One guest on this special edition of Bang the Book Radio for Tuesday, April 9th. That is Brian Blessing, the host of Sportsbook Radio and Vegas Hockey Hotline. Brian, how's it going today, my friend?
All right, Adam. Calm before the storm. Two favorite events are topic, and we get it going. The Masters is nothing better. I love the Masters to begin, and I'm really sad when it ends. And the Stanley Cup playoffs is the best tournament in all of sports. I mean, I don't think there's anything better in all of sports than overtime in a Stanley Cup playoff game.
Well, and when you look at the playoffs, too, I mean, this is one of those things where even the most casual hockey fan, the most casual sports observer loves the NHL playoffs, and deservedly so. I mean, this is high octane, it's high energy, it's, you know, when you think about hockey, when you think about the way that it's played, I mean, the only thing I can think that compares to what the playoffs look like is when you get into the medal round for the Olympics, and you've really got those teams going all out. This is basically like Olympic hockey for 2 months almost.
Every check is delivered with criminal intent. There's less room to work out there. The passion, the desperation, the sense of urgency, the speed, the physicality. And then, like I said, when you get to overtime, the drama of this is when it can end. And you find yourself watching a game, and you got to bet on it. It's a little bit different, but generally speaking, if you don't have action on it, you're sitting there rooting for the goaltenders because you don't want it to end. You want to see it keep going.
All right, so let's talk in general here about the NHL playoffs first. Then we'll dig into some series prop prices and, kind of break down all these different series as we go along. But in general, Brian, from a game-by-game standpoint, how does your handicapping mentality change relative to what you were doing during the regular season?
Well, I think the one thing you get is that maybe it's a bizarre analogy, and we just had it recently. My favorite betting event is the WGC match play in golf, where you get to watch them play on Wednesday, and then they turn around and play another match on Thursday. So you get to watch current form. Sometimes maybe you find a little value on the board, but it's the eyeball test, and then you can see this team starting to wear a team down. This team rolls 4 lines, that team rolls 3 lines, and you can see late in the game that fourth line start to take a toll, and say, well, okay, they're starting to wear down to the point where it could have an impact on the game or who sees momentum. So it's the eyeball test when you're playing the same team every 48 hours.
Well, another thing that I know that you mentioned on the videos that you did over on our Bang the Book YouTube channel, you did one for the Eastern Conference, one for the Western Conference. You were noticing that now that we're into the postseason, the sports books have made some adjustments from a totals standpoint. We had a lot of goals this year in the NHL. We had a lot of first period overs. We had some teams that were cash cows when it came to playing first period overs. You've noticed that some of the numbers have been adjusted a little bit here for the postseason.
Yeah, I'd say generally speaking about a half goal most series, and then we'll see how it changes. Columbus, Tampa stayed 6.5, and the one I think was kind of telling, maybe Toronto and Boston. I think that's a number you could have seen 6.5 during the regular season. You're seeing 6. I do think the norm's going to become 5.5, even for higher scoring teams. And then, listen, you look at the Dallas National Series, the adjustment's already been made. Bishop went on his game. Yeah, sometimes you need a pistol to beat the guy, and that total's already 5. So, I think there would be the biggest adjustments. You may see, adjustments on the total. And in a general rule of thumb, and it's not a black and white across the board thing, but generally speaking, this has really worked over the years to me, is I like game ones to be over the total, and then competitive series that you believe will be competitive, ultimately, game 2 tends to shade towards the under because the team that's down, plays a little closer to the vest, shores up things in their own end, and there's a lot less room to work out there. The first game, there really is that feeling out process, but that feeling out process leads itself to a little more wide open hockey, and then the hate and the angst builds up, and things tend to tighten up.
Well, and you mentioned that 5, the total for the Stars and Predators game coming up here on Wednesday night. Only 5 games with a closing total of 5 during the regular season. 4 of them did go under the total. 1 of them pushed. That was Minnesota and Dallas back on March 14th. So we haven't had a whole lot of totals of 5 here this season. We get one here on the opening night of the NHL playoffs in that Dallas and Nashville series. And one other thing I want to mention here that you talked about, early on in a series, teams may be a little bit more aggressive. They may be out there trying to see control of the series, maybe taking a couple more chances. But as you get deeper into the series, when mistakes get magnified and can potentially send you home, games definitely tighten up as they increase in importance.
No, they do, and it's kind of a goofy analogy, but it's. I think it makes sense to a degree. It was one of the hot topics this year in the NHL. Everybody discovered something that's been around for 3 years. Was the first period overs, and you'll see games. So many of those games would go over the total in the first period. Yet those games could stay under the total because, generally speaking, at the beginning of the game, somebody's got to get the lead ultimately. So kind of in the beginning of the game, teams go for it, and then the team that gets the lead is protecting, and the other team maybe tightens up and count on goaltending and special teams, and the game tightens up. So just like a game in the back third of the season tightens up, plus where they would protect the point. And if teams were valuing tightening up, protecting a point in the regular season, I think of the magnitude and the importance of the game in the playoffs, that same mindset's there as the game goes on. So they kind of go for it early, then the game tightens up. And that's what happens in series.
Well, and I was just going to say that, I just ran that query over at Killer Sports about totals of 5, and the first game that had a total of 5 this year was March 8th. So that speaks to what you were saying about how, things do tighten up later in the year. We'll see that when things tighten up later in games and later in the series here in the NHL playoffs. So, Brian, let me ask you this before we start breaking down some of these individual series here. We've talked a lot about things from a totals aspect. What do you do differently in terms of sides here in the playoffs? Is there anything else that you're looking at?
No, I pretty much, Adam, I think, it's still just a game. The one thing I would say, for me personally, in hockey was always that kind of thing with the amount of games that were on a wager board. I think you're out of your mind if you lay anything more than 30 cents. There's just too many options. And I probably play totals 70% of the time anyway. My thing is, I personally, I think over the course of 60 minutes, I have a read on the game with the pace of the game over the course of 60 minutes. It's hockey. You get bad bounces here. You get bad bounces with a football. Playing football, you get the backdoor cover and things of that nature. But to me, I always focus on totals because the one thing that is the constant is the pace of the game for the entire game.
All right, so what I'm going to do here in terms of the series, I'm going to go by rotation number for game 1. So we'll start with the Eastern Conference. We'll do the 2 series on Wednesday, the 2 series on Thursday. Then we'll go to the Western Conference. 3 series there in the Western Conference on Wednesday, 1 coming up on Thursday. So the first game on the board by rotation number is the first game of the night. Columbus takes on Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay minus 225 favorite in game 1, minus 400 favorite for the series. Look, we talked about this all year long. Tampa Bay was the best team in the NHL, probably by a country mile in the regular season. Now what? Can Tampa Bay avoid what would be a pretty shocking upset here by Columbus?
Well, the one kind of long-standing mantra that is true, and I will step up to the plate and say this, is more likely I will say it in the Western Conference, but the one thing about this sport is an 8 seed can beat a 1. And that's just flat out true. It's been done before. Not only can 8 seeds beat a 1, 8 seeds can get a win, get a sense of belief, and then go on and win the whole thing. And the reality of it is Tampa Bay was playing for this, not a mythical thing, but they were playing for this historic record. And the best thing that ever happened to them is that they lost about a week and a half ago. But expending energy for something like that when you're coming into the playoffs, I don't know that it served them any purpose. The reason the 8s are always dangerous is the 8s have been playing playoff hockey for 5 weeks. They've already ratcheted it up. They've been, making that push just to get in. To that end, Columbus made the big splash at the trade deadline, went all in, mortgaged the future for the now, and for the longest time, it was a coin flip whether they were even going to get in. To their credit, they went 7-3 in their last 10, and they do have a truckload of talent. From a talent perspective, Tampa was looking at these guys going, "Whoa!" I mean, there are other teams that have been kind of a machine all year long. Columbus struts out an inordinate amount of this is a walk in the park for Tampa in any way, shape, or form. I ultimately think Tampa does get out of here, but I think it's at least a 6-game series. So from a betting perspective, there are going to be opportunities at a juicy plus price during the course of this series to jump on board Columbus.
Now, these two teams played each other 3 times in the regular season, and Tampa Bay outscored Columbus 17-3 in those 3 games. Does that mean anything to you going into the postseason?
No, and I will, as we chat here, I'll see if I can very quickly, to your point, go through the schedule here. And, the computer, it's amazing. The computer never cooperates, when you're trying to do something fast, it decides to. I'm trying to find out when they played. I mean, that would be only.
It was October 13th, was 8-2 Tampa Bay. January 8th, 4-0 Tampa Bay. February 18th, 5-1 Tampa Bay.
February 18th. The trade deadline was February 26th, right? So those games, even if everybody was here, I mean, the regular season game, were they back-to-back nights? Was a team on the third game in 4 nights? Was they the last game of a road trip? There's all that kind of stuff that goes into play. But just generally speaking, to your question, I would be more inclined to completely just throw that with the bathwater. It was before the trade deadline. So Columbus didn't have Duchesne and Zingle, and and then the general manager saying, "Here, guys, I'm giving you this to go for." So you really, I think, in that specific instance, I'd say you're comparing apples and watermelons.
Well, and there's one thing that we know for certain about this series. Sergei Bobrovsky has to be the best player for Columbus for them to advance. And that's one of the great equalizers here in the playoffs is that if you get a goaltender who plays completely out of his mind, that can be something that can shift the balance of a series. Bobrovsky has that upside, has that ability. Maybe he hasn't shown it as consistently this year as he has in the past, but that is the one thing for Columbus that could balance this series out. If he goes out there and otherworldly and keeps Columbus in these games, and that's the one thing about hockey that's unique to this sport is that I guess maybe you could talk about it in baseball, but it's a different starting pitcher every game. It's the one thing about hockey is the goaltender.
Well, that's right. It's the great equalizer. Here, you want another little and I'm not trying to manufacture a case for Columbus. Let's not sell Tampa Bay short. I mean, it's an incredible hockey team. It's their Stanley Cup to lose. And anything short of a Stanley Cup, and they're massively disappointed. And time would heal all wounds, but they would probably deem they would have rather had 115 points and won a Stanley Cup. The other thing I would throw at you, and these guys are mercenaries, right? I mean, Vegas ran to the Stanley Cup final last year, and no one ever talked about it. There was the one thing. There were 30 reasons why what happened here last year. But the one thing no one ever talked about was that 14 of them were unrestricted or restricted free agents, and they were all playing for money, right? So now Bobrovsky is making $7,425 a year. He's an unrestricted free agent on July 1st. Having a great season and all that, that's all great. Those are all numbers that rack up. But you know what GMs will pay for? Guys that step up on the big stage. So Bobrovsky's playing for, he's 30 years old. It's going to be his last monster contract. And if this guy knocked off Tampa Bay and Columbus went on a run, the price of poker goes up for Bobrovsky. And I don't think you should ever lose sight of the fact that this guy, as much as he's playing for the team, he's also playing for number one and can print a lot of money if he's the man and Columbus goes on a run.
All right, so let's look at the next series here. It's an excellent point to leave off on about that Columbus-Tampa Bay series. We go to Pittsburgh and the Islanders. Game 1, 7:30 Eastern puck drop tomorrow night. Islanders a -109 favorite at home. Total 5.5, juice to the under here in this one. And this is a fascinating series because you've been there, done that many times over in the Pittsburgh Penguins. Really, for the Islanders, the only been there, done that guy is the head coach in Barry Trotz. So how are you breaking this series down?
Well, I will tell you this. The Trotz one's a big one because at the end of the day, Trotz obviously hoisted the cup, but he was really kind of the key to that final series last year. Their scheme got the best of Vegas, and Vegas didn't get a grip on it until Game 5. Finally had a lead, and then the Caps won it with sheer effort at the end, and then maybe that series got interesting, but they rallied in the third period of Game 5. But Trotz is, a spectacular X's and O's guy. And the Islanders are going to make life difficult. The thing that will be interesting to me is if the Islanders win the series is what do we do in the next round? Because they are playing on Long Island in a barn that's insane and raucous, and then if they win this, they're going to go back to the Barclays Center with obstructed views and bad ice. So that might be intriguing if the Islanders were to advance. But, you mentioned it, the back class, Pittsburgh almost didn't make the playoffs, Adam. I mean, literally, this came down to the final week of the season. Everyone said, look at the Pittsburgh. They can still catch the Islanders. I got news for you. Just being eighth was still in doubt. If they'd have lost 3 in a row at the end of the season, they wouldn't even have made the playoffs. But everybody thinks, Pittsburgh down year. I mean, they had 100 points. Boston's hurt. You still got back class. And for them, Murray's got to step up and be, okay, the guy's won 2 cups. When you think of, do you think of Matt Murray?
No.
I mean, Murray's got to step up, and Murray's won 2 Stanley Cups. So, can he up his game? Crosby is going to do it. Letang will do that. Kessel will get big goals. It really comes down to goaltending. I mean, the one year they won the cup, Fleury's the guy that got him 3/4 of the way there, and then Murray sealed the deal. But nobody's talking about these two. I think it's the most under the radar series of all of them, to be honest with you.
Well, I mean, the Islanders have gotten such good goaltending all year long from Robin Lehner and Thomas Greiss. They've got 2 guys they can rely on here in this series. If Matt Murray struggles, what happens with the Penguins in that regard? And obviously, we've seen goaltending, kind of rear its ugly head at time for the Penguins in the postseason. The Penguins are, however, one of 3 teams without home ice advantage to be favored in their respective series, and they're the biggest favorite without home ice advantage at -147 out there in the offshore market. Obviously, shop around for the best prices that are out there, but Another thing that's pretty interesting about this series regarding Barry Trotz, what coach in the NHL knows Pittsburgh as well as Barry Trotz does? Mike Sullivan, and that's because he's the coach of the Penguins. Trotz has gone head-to-head with this team many times over with Washington, knows what they want to do. Pittsburgh, while they played the Islanders 4 times during the regular season, they don't know them as well as they knew Washington for their playoff head-to-head matchups. So that could be an interesting advantage that Trotz may have in this series. I don't know if that will be the deciding factor. I imagine Pittsburgh probably moves on, but the Islanders are very intriguing for a variety of different reasons. And as you mentioned, not only are they not getting much respect, this series doesn't seem to be getting the respect it deserves.
Everything you said is spot on. The one thing, which will sound odd here as we're trying to dish out information for people, I'll be honest with you. I'm looking across the board, and maybe this series is the synopsis of the whole thing. These are great series. I mean, there's maybe 1 or 2 series where I'm sitting there going, yeah, I'm convinced this team's going to advance. I think they're all really close to even, and I think there are gray areas that, good on anybody that can stand there and say, oh, yeah, 6 of the 7, I like this, I like that. I just think there are questions all over the place, and it's really compelling. I will be going very much on a game-by-game basis here with only a series or 2 play. But I think this series kind of defines that. It's Pittsburgh's back class with stars against a true team with a coach that can be the X factor. And to me, it's a coin flip.
All right, so we move to Thursday here for Game 1 of Toronto and Boston. Boston about $1.50 favorite at home. A lot of people believe that the Bruins are the second best team in the NHL when they're healthy and firing on all cylinders. They're a minus 140 favorite here in this series against Toronto. These 2 teams played each other 4 times in the regular season, but have not played since January 12th. 3 of those games from November 10th to December 8th. So both teams obviously a lot different here at this point in time. Brian, what do you think about this series?
Wow. From a series price perspective, I think the Leafs are getting some respect here, deservedly so, but the number does seem, for a series, the number seems a little low to me. The bottom line is Toronto is a train wreck in their own end of the race. They went and they got Jake Muzzin, and you got this thing going on now. Toronto, they believe they're the center of the hockey universe. It's a soap opera. You got Babcock and the GM DeBoss not getting along. Babcock knew he needed more. Muzzin's a nice player. Muzzin's not going to be the guy who puts you over the top. So Anderson is going to have to be terrific in this game because I think Boston will get more quality scoring chances throughout the course of most of these games. That being said, when you've got Matthews and Marner and Nylander, and those are the top 3, but there are a lot of other guys. Well, not even mentioning Tavares. They are loaded. I think it's a correlated parlay. I think Toronto who can dictate pace? Toronto will want to suck Boston into a track meet kind of game, and that would be to their advantage that they've got the firepower that they think they could outscore Boston. The one thing is Boston can score. Boston can play that game. But if Boston plays Cassidy's got them with the really sound, diligent work, 200-foot game, both ends of the rink, take care of business in your own end, minimize their chances, you're going to get theirs. At the end of the day, Boston should win this series. And then there's the old bugaboo, too, where Toronto has this mindset, we can't beat these guys. And, here we are, we're finally with this young team we think we can go and win a Stanley Cup, and they got to play the Bruins, a team that they'll never forget that when they had the Bruins beat in the playoffs, and Reimer couldn't stop a bowling ball and blew the series a few years back. And that mental scar is still there, let me tell you.
Well, and what's interesting here is that you've got this Toronto team second most goals allowed of any playoff team. The team that allowed the most, the San Jose Sharks, and their goaltending all year was absolutely awful. So we'll talk about that series out west in a couple of minutes. But for Toronto, as you mentioned, I mean, they're going to have to score. And can they do that against a Boston team that only allowed 215 goals? I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. It should be an interesting series, but I agree with you that of the series prices that are out there, I think the Bruins minus 140 is probably the most attractive one to me.
Yeah, I honestly, I probably would have made that 70, 75, something like that.
All right, one more series to talk about here in the Eastern Conference. I think this one's the most compelling. I think Pittsburgh and New York will be very tightly played. I think it'll be very interesting. But the most compelling one to me is Carolina and Washington. I mean, Carolina in the playoffs for the first time in 10 years. Washington gets that Stanley Cup monkey off of its back, specifically Alex Ovechkin getting it off of his back. These two teams were only separated by 5 points in the Metropolitan Division. It's going to be a good one here. Washington did sweep the season series, including 2 wins in late March, but Carolina, analytics darling. They're one of the top teams over the last few years in terms of all the advanced metrics that are out there. This is going to be a really intriguing series and probably one that's closer than most people expect, with Washington about a minus 150 series price favorite.
No, I'm with you. Everything you just said is spot on. The one thing I would say big picture is, and I always maintain, the first series is the hardest one to win. You get all the cliches, right? Oh, the fourth game of the series is the hardest one to win and closing them out. I think the first round's the hardest one to win. Everybody, for the most part, they're as healthy as they're going to be. There's nerves and, goofy things happen. But once teams win in the first round, then they've clearly settled into the routine that is the playoffs, and then the sense of belief grows. And to me, Washington is the danger in the East for a number of reasons. The biggest one is, Adam, they're playing with house money. The anvil is off the shoulders of Ovechkin. Yeah, this team won. It's hard to defend. But if a team was ever going to do it, I could see it being these guys, because they're not squeezing the stick and pressing, and they've got the sniper, they've got the physicality, and now Holtby's a goaltender. What everybody forgets is last year Grubauer started the playoffs, and then Holtby comes in and goes on this ridiculous run. That's how goofy this stuff is. Is they go on to win the Stanley Cup with a goalie that they didn't think highly enough of or wasn't playing well enough going into the playoffs to start him in the playoffs. And only because they were getting pitchforked, they brought the guy in, and then he set them on their merry way. So I think the same kind of thing exists here. Carolina's been a remarkable story, and everybody talks about the post-game celebrations. But whatever it was, Justin Williams, they had this rallying cry, and they adopted the us against the world mentality. And a lot of teams will do this, and Carolina's grabbed onto that us against the world. We're the bunch of jerks and that. But it's a good hockey team. They got size. They've got. Don't think it's Washington. I think it's Washington, to be honest with you. I long-winded to get to the point that it's Washington, but maybe it's more. Could Washington lose? Yes. But if Washington wins, look out.
So here's my question about Carolina. We talked about goaltenders and how they can be the great equalizers. Is Peter Mrazek good enough to get Carolina not just this upset, but also go on a playoff run?
Well, you would think no. It would be the obvious answer. But they won 46 games. Something was working there. Is it possible? Yes. I would say it's the Capitals, but I wouldn't diminish this thing, and it is a thing. Listen, is Carolina this year's Vegas? I think Calgary in the West maybe is, but is Carolina this year's? Oh, wasn't that a nice story last year? Oh, Vegas. Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Great expansion team. All right, they had okay. That was nice. So the playoffs are here. Well, Vegas made it to Game 5 of the Stanley Cup Final. Can it be Carolina? Sure it can.
All right, so let's move over to the Western Conference here. The first game, again, going by rotation number with these series breakdowns based on game one. The first game, 8 o'clock puck drop Eastern time between St. Louis and Winnipeg. St. Louis about as hot as you could get in the second half of the year. Erased and releasing deficit in the playoffs. They wind up tying Winnipeg points, but Winnipeg with the tiebreaker with 3 extra regulation and overtime wins. So they get home ice. But I got to say, Brian, it doesn't seem like there are many believers in the Winnipeg Jets out there from a series standpoint. They are a small favorite in game one, but for the series, the Blues are about $1.30.
Cannot believe this number. St. Louis with Bennington, they played great. I was a believer in them. I'm not going to get off what I said because when they were horrible, when they were hopeless, they had 4 games in hand. And I remember saying on Vegas Hockey Hotline, and my cohort Stevie Slapshot thought I was crazy. I said, they have 4 games in hand, and there's a lot of hockey left to be played, and there's a lot of talent there. And I just don't believe in, the Arizonas of the world and the Vancouvers of the world at the time. I think there's just too much talent there. St. Louis is not, and then they got it going, and they never looked back. And the kid goaltender is great. What is he, 25-4-1? That's ridiculous, the Bennington kid. That being said, Winnipeg was everybody's fashionable pick to win the Cup. I don't believe in Winnipeg, but I also thought St. Louis was a nice regular season story. And I just don't know that they're constructed to do this against the same team in a ground and pound kind of series. And that's what this is. It's an amazing thing, Adam. TV does not show this. But if you're at the rink, when Winnipeg comes on the ice, it's like an NBA team went out there, except with a lot more guys. They're massive. So this is going to be, can St. Louis stand up to the size of Winnipeg? That being said, Winnipeg looked really slow to me at the end of the year, but Buffalo's finding a groove again. The one thing I can tell you is Mark Scheifele will up his game. Last year, it was Scheifele against the Golden Knights in the Western Conference Final, and single-handedly, Patrick Liney's been the big mystery. If that kid ever got his act together, he's a weapon. I'd like to see St. Louis continue it, but I can't believe they're favored starting on the road. I'm mystified by that. But sometimes the number tells you something.
Well, I mean, for the Jets, basically in the second half of the year, they've been a very pedestrian 500 type team. You do sort of wonder, about their goaltending situation as well. Hellebuck, and Brossoit. I mean, Brossoit was hurt late in the year, and he outplayed Hellebuck when he was in there. So Winnipeg's got some goaltending questions here to be sure, but there's also a sentiment, and I agree with what you said here, that maybe Winnipeg's not built for the grind of 82, but they're built for the grind of beating the hell out of you in 5, 6, or 7 games in a series.
That's right.
We'll see how the Blues are able to handle that.
And I'll tell you, they got a lot of guys. That roster, guys that can just step up and they kind of fly under the radar. I will tell you, I think this Kyle Connor kid is something special. He had 34 goals this year. He's lightning on skates. But I love the Perreaults of the world. It's their role guys that to me are really, really good. And I think when you watch him too, a guy that can up his game, I think if Winnipeg's going to do any damage, it's the third line guys that can make the difference. Nikolai Ehlers is a guy who can take over a game with his speed. He strikes me, he's kind of like a Carter guy with LA. Carter would float around all regular season, and then all of a sudden the playoffs would come, and the guy's the most noticeable guy on the ice, and he's a Conn Smythe candidate. That's kind of Nikolai Ehlers to me. Winnipeg's got a lot of those guys. We'll see. This will be intriguing, but Winnipeg was everybody's this fashionable cup pick for most of the year. Now all of a sudden they're a dog with home ice advantage. What happened?
All right, the next series coming up here, 9:30 Eastern time, puck drop for Game 1. Dallas and Nashville. Nashville, $1.60 favorite for Game 1, $1.75 favorite for the series. Look, Dallas has got great goaltending. Ben Bishop has been terrific here this season. Maybe he was the missing piece. This is also a Dallas team that scored 210 goals, 18 fewer than any other team that made the playoffs. So the question obviously here is, Nashville's a pretty solid team. They have been year in and year out. They play a great system there with Laviolette. If Pekka Rinne plays well, they should advance. That's kind of the question is, can Dallas out Nashville at their own game by winning a bunch of 2-1, 3-1 types of games?
Well, that's it in a nutshell. The goaltender is the great equalizer, and Ben Bishop has to literally stand on his head. Now, before he had gotten hurt, I think he had 3 shutouts in a row. You needed a BB gun to beat him. So, yeah, it's Ben Bishop against Nashville here. The one thing is, hockey's such a great sport, and chemistry and all these things. Everybody forgets Dallas was just treading water, and they were sinking. And then all of a sudden, management called the guys out, and it was like, whoa, look at that. And literally, Ben and these guys, they threw them under the bus. Well, whatever it was, Dallas said, oh, we'll show those guys. But they challenged their pride, and they responded. And that shouldn't go unnoticed that management had a read on this team and called these guys out and got their attention. Nashville's my pick to win the Cup, Adam. I'm not getting off it. I had Nashville over Tampa before the season. Regular season's a long haul. Now it's this got to win 16 games thing. Nashville gets the division win, by the way. I would have liked them no matter what. But winning the division was monstrous for them. Had St. Louis won that division and you had to play Winnipeg in the first round, you're going to get just beat up. Them avoiding Winnipeg was monstrous. We'll see what St. Louis does for Nashville. Their top 4, everybody loves Hedman and everything they got going on in Tampa Bay. Across the board, the defense for Nashville is spectacular. Their first line flies under the radar, is spectacular. That atmosphere in Nashville, it comes down to Pekka Rinne. If Rinne is the really good Pekka Rinne, I think Nashville wins the Cup. If Rinne has these highs and lows and ups and downs and it's not good, well, like any team, they would have a problem. But Saros is a really good backup. So I like this Nashville team. I love the way they're positioned. They're my pick to win it all.
All right, so I feel like you may have takes on this series here. 10:30 Eastern puck drop Wednesday night, Vegas and San Jose. And quite frankly, Brian, right now you got San Jose $1.35 favorite for game 1. Vegas is favored to win the series, though, in the -115 range offshore. But when you look at these two teams, they both had noticeable limps coming into the postseason.
And noticeable excuses, but that's all they are excuses. Fleury was out, missed 9 games. Carlson wasn't there for the Sharks. They played recently, and it was physical and nasty, and messages were sent. Vegas beat them last year in the playoffs in 6 games. It has the makings of a great series. The problem is we're sitting there going, which team is going to flip the switch better? And that's a dangerous game to play. Vegas was locked into third for the most part. Can you up the ante all of a sudden? Vegas is healthy, and San Jose got Carlson back. San Jose was an absolute train wreck in their own end without Erik Karlsson. And, you only need 5 defensemen when you have Erik Karlsson and Burns, and these guys both play 30 minutes. So it seems like Carlson's healthy, which cleans up San Jose in their own end. But the one thing I would say that's different than last year, they're different teams, where you've got Stastny, Pacioretty, and then the late addition of Mark Stone. So that's a completely different look for Vegas on the second line, and it's a massive second line. The one thing I'd say, at the end of the day, you got the edge in goaltending with Fleury. Everybody would say that. But doesn't Martin Jones stand up and say, I'm sick of hearing this, and play great? It's so close a series to me. And I still can't come up with a decision. I think it's going 7, and I do think Vegas can win there in 7. But it is so close that I think the determining factor could be Vegas's fourth line. And that sounds insane. But Gallant will put his fourth line out there with 3 minutes to go in a 3-3 game and play them with confidence because they carry play. And with Carrier and Reeves, these guys do exact a physical toll. That Vegas, with confidence, can play four lines more regularly over a long series. It could be the difference maker. That's how close I think this series is.
No, I mean, that makes a lot of sense, especially if you're going to see, Brent Burns and Erik Karlsson out there playing 30, 35 minutes a game, especially with Karlsson being hurt most of the year. That will take its toll over the course of a long series for the Sharks. I think, to me, and I agree with what you said about the fourth line and about Vegas's depth being such an attractive thing here, it's all about goaltending. Martin Jones, Aaron Dell, neither guy played particularly well in the regular season. Marc-Andre Fleury has slayed some playoff demons here recently. Certainly did it last year with Vegas. But again, as you mentioned, missed 9 games down the stretch, gave up 4 goals in each of his 2 starts heading into the postseason here. You sort of wonder where he is. I mean, physically he should be fresh, but not playing regularly. Is that a benefit for him or is that a negative for him going into this series?
I will say this. I thought, and this is 2 years in a row they did this. This year I get it because he had missed so much time. But after what I saw in the first period of the Kings game, I'm like, get him out of there. What are you doing? Why are you running the risk of getting this guy hurt? Yeah, he gave up 4 goals. Let me tell you, it could have been 10. Vegas was an atrocity in their own end. Fleury come back off the shelf, terrific. I mean, the games, they were split in 4. I mean, some of the saves he made were remarkable. And the goals that were scored were tap-ins. I can't think of one goal that was clearly his fault. So if Fleury was not the issue, that's the one thing that just scares me is, yeah, they're meaningless games, but boy, did a lot of bad habits creep in for Vegas. I mean, they have got to manage the puck better. I mean, they treated the puck like it was radioactive in their own end of the rink in those games coming in. Now, Fleury's not the concern. I think Fleury is going to be fine. What I saw in those 2 games, he was fine if Vegas shores things up on their own end.
One more series to touch on here, then we'll talk some Masters stuff. So for those holding on for the Masters content, I apologize. But a lot to talk about here with the NHL. The NHL playoffs, a lot of fun. A lot of good betting opportunities with those as well. Colorado and Calgary. Calgary about $1.80 favorite for Game 1. Colorado, a big underdog here for the series. Calgary in the -215 range. Second biggest favorite on the board. Not a big surprise with a 1-versus-8 matchup here. What do you think about this series, Brian?
Stepping up to the plate with Colorado. This is the one I gladly jump in at that price. Colorado was 7-1-2 in their last 10. And I'm not disrespecting what Calgary did all year long. Peters, Jack Adams, finalist. Gaudreau's amazing. They're going to win all kinds of awards. Giordano, right? He's going to win the Norris probably. I just think Colorado is top-heavy, but when you've got a top line like they've got and a goaltender playing at the level he's playing at right now, I really think Colorado can get a split out of Calgary in the first 2, and all of a sudden, this wonderful story for Calgary, now all of a sudden it's the weight of expectations, and I think Colorado comes in here loose as a goose, and they're dangerous.
Well, of course, Colorado, great home ice advantage here with the altitude, to be sure. The question I have, again, I go back to goaltending. I mean, what do you get from David Rittich here if you're Calgary in this series? We think Grubauer should be pretty good. He was very good down the stretch. Obviously there with Braden Holtby and the Capitals during their playoff runs. Maybe wasn't the biggest component of their postseason runs, but did help them get to a certain point last year. So at least he's been through the ringer a little bit and at least knows what these games feel like. David Rittich has virtually no clue. And Mike Smith did not play well during the regular season. That's the concern for Calgary here. I mean, is this a series where maybe you expect this one to be a little bit more high scoring than the others?
No, honestly. I think the thing is, Grubauer's been absolutely unbelievable. Varlamov's no ham sandwich. The funny thing is, in this series, you may see both goaltenders. Is it Rittich or Smith? But I'm telling you, Grubauer was so good at the end of the year and in this run to get them in. He was just remarkable. And I think, and the one is, Colorado's a sneaky physical team, too. I'm going to love, this is going to be a great series. The Tkachuk kid with the Flames is going to be just living in, and he is just the guy. He's the modern era Dale Hunter. He's just the guy who drives everybody nuts. I think this is really one of the most compelling first-round series. I mean, maybe Calgary just stomps them in the first two games, and there's a sense of resignation with Colorado. Well, they're just way better than us. I just believe Colorado goes in there, and if they get 1 out of 2 out of Calgary, this series is going a long way, and I actually think Colorado can win it.
I can tell you this about this series. I mean, with this Carolina run that they've started to build here, they built this a couple of years ago where Bill Peters and his team had, again, really good advanced metrics. They just weren't able to win enough games. They didn't get enough goal scoring. They didn't have enough finishers, stuff like that. Peters winds up going to Calgary here. Not a big surprise to see that they're such a good team from an advanced metrics standpoint. But I got to watch Jared Bednar for the Lake Erie Monsters, or maybe it was the first year they were the Cleveland Monsters, go through and make that Calder Cup run with that team. And look, they had Zach Werenski, and obviously he's a fantastic player, and he took over games at that level. But Jared Bednar had ideal game plans for every series. I went to a lot of those playoff games. He's a very, very good head coach. He's built up this Colorado team nicely, and yeah, they're a little bit top-heavy, but I expect Bednar to have a really good game plan for this series, too. This is probably the most underrated coaching matchup of the first round, I think.
Yeah, and, like the Stars, I don't know if they're buried in Colorado, maybe a bad way to say it, but you need your best players to be your best players. And if you give Colorado the edge in goaltending, there were nights when McKinnon put this team on his shoulders and willed them to victory. He is so fast. He's amazing. They're top-heavy. But what if McKinnon, Rantanen, and Landeskog just go nuts? If you look at them 5-on-5 this year, they were plus 46 as a group. I mean, if that line is out there and they're carrying play 5-on-5 and then throw them on special teams, and again, the current form, and they've played playoff hockey just to get here, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility.
A lot of good thoughts here on the NHL playoffs, both the East and the West from Brian Blessing. Make sure you keep an eye out over at BangTheBook.com for Parker Michaels' playoff primer as well. That'll be a very deep statistical dive into all of these first-round matchups. And then, of course, East and West previews over on our Bang the Book YouTube page from Brian Blessing. So if you want hockey coverage, we'll have plenty of it at BangTheBook.com.